I woke up to the kind of fog that clings to everything. Fog wasn't anything new for us. Living in a valley, it was practically a morning routine, the dense mist pooling in like an ocean of white. But this fog felt different. The moment I let our dog, Tucker, outside for his morning run, he bolted into the backyard and vanished. "Tucker," I called, stepping out onto the dew-drenched grass. Our yard isn't enormous. It's big enough for the kids to run around, but not so big that a 90-pound dog could disappear in it. I could hear him, faintly, sniffing and pawing around somewhere in the mist. But no matter how hard I squinted, the far fence was gone, swallowed whole by the pale void. The kids, of course, were ecstatic. "This is awesome," Adrian cheered. "It's like living in a dream," Emma added, her face pressed against the glass door. I didn't share their enthusiasm. The faint roar of cars on the road out front was unsettling, dulled and muted by the thick air. "That's a lot of fog," I muttered to my wife, Mary, who stood sipping her coffee. "It's dangerous out there today. Reminds me of Maine," she said, smirking. I braced myself. The Maine fog story. I'd heard it 100 times. That's marriage in a nutshell. Listening to the same stories on a loop. It was so thick you couldn't see the hood of your car. And then I tuned her out, peeking through the curtains to assess the front yard. The mist pressed up against the windows like an unwelcome guest. The driveway was barely visible, and the row of privacy shrubs lining our property looked like faint shadows. And I smashed right into a tree. It was just a sapling, but still, Mary laughed, as she always did at the climax of the tale. "Daddy, can we go outside?" Emma tugged at my arm, her face lit with excitement. I don't think." "Please," she begged, her wide eyes sparkling. I caved, as parents often do. "Okay, but don't go far." The second I opened the door, the kids shot outside, their laughter disappearing into the fog. A sense of unease settled in my chest as I followed them into the white abyss. I took a few steps, then stopped. Where were they? "Emma? Adrian? We're over here." Emma's voice called out, somewhere to my left. I turned and saw the hazy outline of their playhouse. "That's odd. I thought I was closer to the fence where Mary used to grow her roses. This is our secret cloud castle," Emma declared from the little wooden structure. Adrian zoomed around her on his scooter, imitating the sound of a jet engine. I sat in the grass, keeping a wary eye on them. Something about the fog felt off, like it wasn't just weather. By 9 a.m., it was still as dense as it had been at dawn, refusing to dissipate with the sun. And then I noticed the silence. Our neighborhood is usually filled with the background noise of life. Kids playing, lawnmowers humming, and those yappy white dogs 3 houses down barking at every leaf that moves. But this morning, there was nothing, not a sound. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to some neighbors. 5 minutes passed, then 10. No response. I searched online for anything about the weather, but found nothing unusual. Morning run time. Mary's voice startled me. She stepped out of the fog, her silhouette sharpening as she approached. "Not today. It's too foggy," I said. She gave me a look. Since when is fog an excuse? Damn it. She was my fitness accountability partner, and she didn't let me off easy. Reluctantly, I went inside, changed, and headed out for a jog. The fog clung to me like a damp blanket as I ran. The world felt strange, muffled, as if the fog wasn't just obscuring sight, but swallowing sound. As I rounded a corner, I heard faint whistling. It was Mr. Cambery, our neighbor, trimming his shrubs like it was any other day. "Hey, Jared," he called. "Morning," I replied, slowing my pace. "What do you make of this fog?" He shrugged, snipping away at the bushes. "We always get fog. Yeah, but not like this. It's so thick, and it's nearly 10 a.m. Doesn't that seem unusual? Nope. He started whistling again, signaling the conversation was over. I jogged on, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me. About 10 houses down, the whistling abruptly stopped. Not like he had finished, but like someone had turned the volume dial to 0. When I got back home, the sound of barking dogs briefly cut through the silence. Relief washed over me. Finally, something normal. But then the barking faded, the same unnatural way the whistling had. "Mary," I said as I stepped inside. "Something's wrong. Let's bring the kids in." She hesitated, but relented. I opened the playhouse door and reached for Emma. "Come on, sweetie." She frowned. "But where's Adrian?" My heart sank. "Adrian? Adrian!" I shouted, scanning the backyard. No response. My gaze landed on the gate. It was open. I bolted toward it, fear coursing through me. If he wandered into the road. "Adrian!" Then I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. A rhythmic sound, faint but growing louder as I approached. I found him at the edge of the yard, standing motionless against the fence. He was banging his head against it. "Adrian!" I grabbed his shoulders and pulled him back. "What are you doing?" He stared at me, eyes wide and empty. "I got lost," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I was trying to get back to you, but I couldn't." I hugged him tightly, whispering reassurances. But inside, my fear grew. Something wasn't right. And it wasn't just the fog. The fog lingered long after the sun dipped below the horizon. Inside the house, silence hung as thick as the mist outside. The four of us sat at the dinner table, pushing food around our plates. No one had much to say. Emma was still pouting about her outdoor playtime being cut short, while Adrian stared blankly into space, his fork idly tracing patterns in the sauce. My wife, Mary, made a few valiant attempts to start a conversation, but her words felt hollow, bouncing off the oppressive stillness like echoes in an empty room. For me, the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Thump, thump, thump. That sound from earlier looped in my mind, refusing to let go. Adrian had always been an adventurous kid, constantly testing his limits in ways that made my heart skip. Jumping off furniture, spinning wildly in chairs, climbing anything he could. But what I'd seen today wasn't the reckless play of a spirited child. It was deliberate, mechanical, like he was under some unseen force's control. I pushed my plate away, appetite long gone. "You're done?" Mary asked, tilting her head. "Yeah, I think so." "Wow, looks like no one's hungry tonight." She gestured toward the kids' barely touched plates, then returned to eating. "Can I go play with my dolls?" Emma piped up. "I want to go too." Adrian mumbled, finally breaking his vacant stare. "5 more bites," Mary instructed, pointing her fork at them. Begrudgingly, they complied before scampering off to the playroom. Their laughter faded down the hall, leaving Mary and me alone with the sound of running water as we started clearing the table. "Are you okay?" she asked casually, scrubbing a plate under the faucet. I hesitated, staring at her. "I don't know. I'm still shaken up about Adrian." She shrugged, her tone light. "It's not that unusual, Jared. Kids do strange things sometimes, biting, banging their heads, you name it. It's a way of processing emotions or seeking attention. He's only 4. He's still figuring things out. Maybe." I didn't sound convinced. Her nonchalance unsettled me. This wasn't the Mary the first used to know, the one who used to fret over every little cough or scrape. When we were expecting Adrian, there had been a health scare, a false alarm, but terrifying nonetheless. She'd been a nervous wreck for weeks. Now, she seemed unfazed, like nothing could shake her. I dumped Adrian's untouched pasta into the trash and turned back to the counter. That's when I saw it. Mary's favorite dish, Emma's frozen plate, lay shattered on the floor. Its bright colors split into jagged shards. And next to it, Mary, her body sprawled across the kitchen tiles, lifeless. One arm bent awkwardly across her chest, the other flung out beside her. Dark red liquid seeped in her pink dress, pooling beneath her head. Her wide eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. I froze, the air caught in my lungs. Mary, I dropped to my knees, reaching for her shoulder. Mary, what happened? Jared. I whipped around. Mary stood behind me, alive and whole, holding the same frozen plate I thought I'd seen broken on the floor. What's wrong with you? She asked, concern etched on her face. I looked down at the tiles. There was no blood, no body, nothing. A nothing, I stammered, standing up too quickly. I just slipped. I'm fine. She frowned, but she didn't press further. She turned back to the sink, rinsing the plate as if nothing had happened. I backed away, my hands trembling. What the hell was that? A hallucination? A vivid daydream? I glanced out the window. The fog pressed against the glass like a living thing, thick and impenetrable. My skin prickled as an idea crept into my mind. Mary, I said cautiously, do you think maybe this isn't fog? She turned to me, raising an eyebrow. What do you mean? Like, could it be something else? Smoke? Gas? Maybe something toxic that's messing with our heads? My words tumbled out in a rush. Her expression turned skeptical. No, Jared. It's fog. Plain old fog. You're overthinking it. But what about Adrian? And I stopped short. Telling her about the hallucination felt like a bad idea. I don't know. Something feels off. You're just stressed, she replied, turning off the sink. Take a deep breath. Everything's fine. I watched her leave the kitchen, disappearing down the hallway. I turned back to the window. Outside, the fog refused to lift, as though it was waiting for something. My reflection stared back at me, pale and drawn. And in that moment, I realized everything was not fine. I sat in the old, creaky rocking chair, its rhythmic squeaks barely cutting through the uneasy silence of the room. Emma was sprawled out on the carpet, coloring pictures with Adrian, her laughter light and innocent, while Mary nestled against me, a thriller novel perched in her lap. Everything looked normal, almost too normal, but my mind wouldn't stop racing, haunted by what I'd seen earlier. I hadn't told Mary about it. I couldn't. There was a reason for my silence, a dark one. Years ago, before Adrian was born, Mary and I hit a rough patch in our marriage. I'd lost my job, and the weight of unemployment had dragged me down into a spiral of depression and alcohol. Most nights, I'd drown my sorrows in the study, slumped over in a drunken haze. Usually nothing came of it, just me passing out in a puddle of my own embarrassment. But one night was different. That night, the kids were staying with Mary's parents. She had gone to a dinner party while I stayed home, drowning myself in whiskey. When she came home late, too late, I wasn't just drunk. I was angry. The second she walked through the door, I noticed she wasn't wearing her cardigan anymore, and the strapless dress she wore seemed to reek of someone else's cologne. Or at least, that's what my drunken mind convinced me. I confronted her. It was ugly. My accusations, her denials. It escalated quickly. Then, I said the 4 words that would scar our relationship forever. I'll fucking kill you. I'd never meant it. I wasn't a violent man. But in that moment of drunken rage, I became someone I didn't recognize. And though we'd worked hard to rebuild what I'd nearly destroyed, I could still see the cracks in Mary's trust. Every so often, she'd flinch if I moved too fast, or she'd cry when our arguments became heated. Some scars never truly fade. So no, I wasn't going to tell her that I'd hallucinated her lying dead on the kitchen floor. I couldn't. I tried to focus on the present, rocking gently in the chair. Emma's giggles filled the air as she handed Adrian a fresh crayon. Mary's arm looped through mine, her warmth grounding me. But my thoughts kept drifting. My mind circled back to the fog. Was it something more than just weather? Could it be a chemical, something airborne, messing with our minds? I looked out the window. The fog had thickened, swallowing the backyard hole. The trees, the fence, the world. It all faded into an endless white void. It felt like we were stranded on an island, isolated from everything beyond the suffocating fog. Later that night, I sat on Emma's bed, reading her favorite storybook. Adrian was already fast asleep, but Emma wasn't ready to surrender to slumber without her usual bedtime routine. "Can we read The Frozen One, Daddy?" she asked, clutching her blanket tightly. "You always want that one," I said, smiling softly. "It's my favorite." Then, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, she asked, "Daddy, is Adrian okay?" My stomach sank. She must have overheard my conversation with Mary earlier. Emma always had a knack for hearing things she wasn't supposed to. "Yes, sweetheart," I assured her. "Adrian's fine. I promise." Satisfied for now, she snuggled closer as I began reading. But her curiosity wasn't sated yet. "Why is it so foggy?" she asked suddenly. "I don't know. Just the weather, I guess," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant. "It's weird," she murmured. "I know. Can I play outside tomorrow, even if it's still foggy?" I hesitated, unsure of what to say. "I don't know, honey. We'll see." She nodded quietly, then looked up at me with wide eyes. "Can you get Mr. Snuggles for me? I can't sleep without him." I groaned internally. "Where is he?" "In the playhouse," she said innocently. I froze. "You left him outside? In the fog?" "We were having a tea party," she explained, as if that justified it. I sighed. "I'll get him tomorrow, but I can't sleep without him," she pleaded, her voice trembling. All right, I relented. "Stay here. I'll be back in a minute." The moment I stepped outside, the air hit me like a wall. It wasn't cold or heavy, just silent. An unnatural stillness settled over the yard, and the fog was so thick it felt like I could reach out and grab it. I walked cautiously, one hand trailing along the fence for guidance. After what felt like an eternity, I spotted the small silhouette of the playhouse, its roof barely visible through the haze. I crouched down, peering inside with my phone's flashlight. There it was, Mr. Snuggles, sitting amid a pile of dirt and leaves. I grabbed the stuffed bear, but as I straightened up, something caught my eye. The tree. There was a hole near its base, just like the one higher up in its trunk. I'd seen the upper hole before, but now I noticed a second, and then a third, perfectly identical, running up the tree in a straight line. The realization sent a chill down my spine. "What the hell?" I whispered, backing away. And then I ran. I sprinted blindly through the fog, desperate to find the house. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled over roots and uneven ground. Finally, the dim glow of the floodlight broke through the haze, guiding me back to safety. I burst through the sliding glass door, gasping for breath. My hands trembled as I turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on my face. "Are you okay?" Mary's voice came from behind me. I turned to answer and froze. Her face was covered in blood. Dark crimson streaks ran down her cheeks, dripping on her dress and pooling on the floor. Her left eye was swollen shut, and a deep gash marred her forehead, as though someone had caved her skull in with a blunt object. "Mary," I choked out, backing away in horror. "What?" she asked, her voice calm and confused. I blinked, and the vision was gone. Mary stood there, unharmed, looking at me with concern. I'm fine, I muttered. I need to check on Emma. And with that, I fled upstairs, clutching Mr. Snuggles like it was a lifeline. I woke up at 6 the next morning. The air in the room felt heavy, almost suffocating. A faint light filtered through the curtains, and I rushed to pull them back, hoping, praying, to see something other than the endless wall of fog that had cloaked our home for days. But outside, it was the same, a thick, pale shroud that devoured everything past a few feet from the window. Ugh! Mary stirred in the bed behind me, her voice groggy. What time is it? Just after 6, I replied, still staring out the window. Okay, she murmured before turning over. I stayed there, rooted in place, the eerie silence pressing in on me. The fog seemed denser than before, a haunting blue-gray that gave no hint of the world beyond our lawn. It swallowed the sidewalk, the road, and even the neighbors' houses across the street. Only the faint glow of a single street lamp managed to pierce the gloom. Everything else felt gone. I stepped back from the window and sat on the edge of the bed. My unease had grown overnight, festering in the quiet hours. I reached for Mary's hand, gripping it tightly. "We need to do something," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "This isn't normal. Something is wrong." She blinked slowly, turning her head toward me. "You're right," she said. "I think we should." And then she froze. Not just a pause in her speech. Her entire body became completely motionless, as if someone had hit pause on her. Her hand went limp in mine, and her face became a blank, unblinking mask. "Mary?" I whispered. My heart began to race. "Mary!" I shook her by the shoulders, trying to snap her out of it. Her eyes stared through me, glassy and empty, like a doll's. For a moment, I thought I'd lost her. Then, without warning, she jerked back to life. "Call the neighbors, I think," she blurted out, her words slurred and unnaturally fast, like a recording being played on double speed. I stared at her, horrified. "Mary, are you okay?" "Of course I'm okay," she replied cheerfully, her tone unnervingly bright. "No, you're not." My voice wavered as I tried to explain. "You froze. You were just sitting there, not moving. And when you spoke, it was like you were malfunctioning or something." "What are you talking about?" she asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Jared, I didn't do anything. You don't remember?" I asked, incredulous. "It just happened, Mary. 30 seconds ago." She gave me a blank stare, then sighed. "Jared, please. You're acting crazy." Her words hit me like a slap. "I'm not crazy. Something is happening here. Adrian hurting himself. You freezing up, me seeing things, this fog, it's doing something to us. It's not normal." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to calm the growing panic inside me. "I think it's a chemical or something. It's messing with our minds." She looked away, avoiding my gaze. That simple gesture was all the confirmation I needed. She didn't believe me. No one did. I stumbled into the bathroom and shut the door behind me. My reflection in the mirror looked pale and haggard, a ghost of the man I used to be. I splashed cold water on my face, letting the droplets run down and fall into the sink. The sound of them hitting the porcelain echoed in the silent room. Tap, tap, tap. And then a thought struck me, a memory, unbidden and sharp. I remembered playing video games on an old, outdated laptop, Skyrim, with its laggy graphics and terrible RAM. Characters freezing in place, only to jolt back to life moments later, their dialogue playing at double speed to catch up. That's exactly what had just happened to Mary. Another memory followed, this one of playing Minecraft with Emma. She'd complained about the foggy landscape, and I had explained how the game's render distance setting worked. How reducing the distance made the fog creep in, hiding everything beyond a certain point. It was a trick, a way to save processing power. What if this isn't real? The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. What if none of this is real? Suddenly, everything began to make sense, or at least a terrifying version of sense. Adrian banging his head against the fence like a glitching NPC stuck in a loop. The identical holes in the tree bark, repeating like a lazy texture. Mary telling the same fog story over and over, as if her dialogue options were limited. What if they're not real? The thought made my stomach churn. What if I'm the only one who is? Daddy, where are you? Emma's voice came from the hallway, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. I turned toward the door, my chest tightening. I couldn't face her. Not now, not like this. Jared. Mary's voice followed, softer but no less insistent. Are you okay in there? I just need a minute. I croaked, my throat dry. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the sink, trying to steady myself. When I finally stepped out, Mary was waiting for me. She sat on the bed, her expression soft and concerned. Jared, talk to me, she said gently. I took a deep breath. Mary, do you love me? Her face softened into a warm smile. Of course I love you, Jared. No, I said, my voice rising. You're just saying that because you're programmed to say it. Don't you get it? None of this is real. Her smile faltered, and then her face began to change. It flickered like static on an old TV, her features rippling and warping. Blood dripped from her eyes, her head lolling to one side. Her body stiffened, and she began to move toward me in jerky, unnatural steps. I turned and bolted down the hall. Emma's room. I had to reach Emma. I found her in bed, her small face peaceful and serene. Emma, I whispered, crouching beside her. Please wake up. I shook her gently, tears streaming down my face. Her eyes snapped open, and then her face rippled, just like Mary's had. No. I stumbled back, only to collide with something solid. I turned to see Adrian standing behind me, his eyes glassy and unblinking. Please, I whimpered, backing away. The floor beneath me began to shift and distort, the familiar tiles breaking apart into jagged, pixelated fragments. I lost my footing and fell, the world collapsing around me into nothing but darkness. My eyes opened abruptly, a sharp jolt pulling me from unconsciousness. I found myself sitting in a small, sterile room. The walls around me were white and featureless, except for one, a large pane of darkened glass stretching from floor to ceiling. The air was still, carrying an unnerving sense of emptiness. A plain desk stood before me, with a single computer resting on its surface. Its screen was blank, the hum of unseen electronics the only sound in the room. Several wires ran from the computer to my head, secured snugly, but not painfully. I tried to lift my hand, but it wouldn't move. It was then that I realized my wrists were restrained, handcuffed to the desk. I strained my ears, catching faint whispers beyond the glass. Shadows flitted behind it, indistinct and fluid, as though figures were moving on the other side. Then, through hidden speakers, a calm but firm voice addressed me. Jared Donahue, do you remember why you're here? The sound of my name echoed in the hollow space. My thoughts churned, foggy and fragmented. Images of familiar faces, Emma, Adrian, Mary, flickered in my mind like distant memories. A dull ache throbbed at my temples, making it harder to focus. I glanced at my hands again, at the metal cuffs that bound them. Panic bubbled inside me. Why am I here? What's happening? My gaze shifted to the black computer screen, searching for answers, but the emptiness offered none. Suddenly, the fog in my mind began to clear. A wave of memories rushed in, vivid and unrelenting. Tears welled in my eyes as the truth came crashing down. The worst night of my life, the night that had led me here, played out in my mind with painful clarity. You remember, don't you? The voice prompted, steady and emotionless. And I did. I remembered everything. It had started as an argument, small at first, but it escalated. Words were exchanged, hurtful and full of anger. "I'll never forgive you," I had shouted, storming into the garage to clear my head. My heart raced as I tried to calm down, gripping the edge of the workbench. When I returned to the kitchen, Mary was there, standing by the sink, a plate in her hands. Her voice was soft, apologetic, but I wasn't ready to hear it. The plate slipped from her grasp, shattering against the floor. She startled, and we both froze for a moment. I sighed heavily, the anger dissipating as quickly as it had come. "I'm sorry," I murmured. She looked at me, her face softening. "Me too." That moment should have been the end of it, a chance to make things right. But something inside me broke, overwhelmed by guilt and fear. Jared Donahue. The voice interrupted my spiraling thoughts, dragging me back to the present. "You are here because of the choices you made that night. Your memories are being reconstructed so you can process and reflect. This program is designed to help you move forward." I stared at the darkened glass, my reflection distorted by the faint shadows moving behind it. Among them, I thought I saw two figures, one tall and lean, the other smaller with soft blonde curls. "Emma? Adrian?" My voice cracked, barely above a whisper. But there was no response. The figures didn't move, their forms as still as statues. A heavy weight settled in my chest as I realized they weren't real. They couldn't be. The fog was thick outside, curling around the trees and swallowing the street beyond. Emma pressed her nose to the window, her voice filled with excitement. "Look, Daddy, it's like magic." Adrian stood beside her, mimicking ghostly sounds as he grinned. "Spooky, huh?" I chuckled softly, the warmth of my coffee grounding me. "That's a lot of fog out there," I said. Mary walked into the room, her smile radiant. "Reminds me of that one time in Maine," she said playfully. The memory was bittersweet, a story she'd told 100 times. I smiled back, savoring the moment. These were the small joys I clung to now, the moments that reminded me of what I had and what I stood to lose. Because even in the fog, there was light,